much for joining me today. My name is Kristen Birdsey. I am the registered dietitian for the ShopRites of Franklin and Newton. And today we are going to be talking about food and how the foods that we eat impact our mood. So before we begin, I just wanted to talk a little bit about ShopRites services. So we do offer free nutrition services in store at Renetco ShopRite stores. Those stores would be ShopRite of Franklin, Newton, Sparta, Byram, Succassana, and Flanders and Mansfield. As dietitians, we provide one-on-one nutrition education and counseling. We do in-person, phone, or virtual consultations, whatever is more convenient for our clients. We do grocery store tours, cooking demonstrations, in-store sampling events, and a lot of different community events. All right. All right, so today we are going to be talking about a lot of different things, but our learning objectives today, I want you to be able to identify 5 common nutritional problems that may affect your mood, identify 6 hormones and or neurotransmitters that can impact both nutrition and mood, be able to recall 3 food behaviors that can help regulate hormones and improve mood, and explain the difference between prebiotics and probiotics. All right, so some of the common nutritional problems that affect mood, not eating regularly. So we definitely want to make sure that we are doing that. We're going to go into more detail about that. Undereating and overeating, having unbalanced macronutrients, certain nutrient deficiencies, and poor diet, which impacts our gut microbiome. All right, I love this quote, let food be thy medicine and let medicine be thy food. So this is very true. Of course, food is not medicine. No single food can cause or cure disease. The key is in moderation, balance, and viewing lifestyle medicine as a collective. Nutrition is a great way to help prevent chronic diseases and help improve our mood and regulate our hormones, which we will be talking about in further detail in a few slides. I just want to stress the fact that nutrition cannot prevent any disease or prevent every disease or condition, but it can affect and help prevent many, especially ones that people are often diagnosed with, such as heart disease and diabetes. As science emerges, so does our ability to live longer, and to live longer, our aim should be to live healthier. Our focus should not only be on physical health, but on mental health as well, because one impacts the other. All right, so our first is not eating regularly. So nutrition is essential for normal physiological function. Food is our fuel. Our food provides us with energy, the energy that we need to function on a daily basis. I usually recommend eating every 3 to 4 hours. This has been shown to improve mood, energy, concentration, productiveness, blood sugar, etc. And eating regularly. So you'd be surprised how many people are not eating regularly on a daily basis. So we definitely want to make sure that we're eating regularly, not skipping meals. That's really important. Eating every 3 to 4 hours, which a lot of people don't do, whether they're very busy or it kind of isn't just something that they normally do. So definitely making it an effort to eat regularly. So for example, the clients that I've had in the healthcare field, such as nurses, they may work long 12-hour shifts. They may work the night shift. So their eating schedule may be different from the average person. So when I say eating regularly, I mean eating regularly for your schedule. So if a nurse is working 12-hour overnight shifts, maybe her biggest meal is dinner, which would be the equivalent of his, her, or their breakfast. Then maybe they have a snack if they're not able to eat another meal for more than 3 to 4 hours. So you want to make sure that you're eating frequently and making sure that you're packing things with you if you do have long work days. I know for healthcare workers, it can be a challenge to try and eat regularly, especially right now with staff shortages, but it's important to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. You cannot drive on an empty tank. And again, food is our fuel. And by fueling yourself properly, you're able to take care of others more efficiently. When we go long periods without eating, the body begins to increase production of cortisol, which is our stress hormone, which can leave us stressed, hungry, and most likely in a bad mood. Stress causes some people to ignore their hunger cues and push through whatever they're doing, and they refrain from eating for long stretches, which isn't really healthy for us. For other people, stress turns them into emotional eaters who mindlessly munch on food throughout the day. Your brain thinks it needs fuel to fight whatever threat is causing the stress. So that can be a reason why a lot of people will mindlessly munch, which is why it's important to keep your body on an eating schedule. So eating every 3 to 4 hours is what is typically recommended and what science backs to help improve our mood. So what happens when you skip meals? So we've established that it's best to have consistent meals and meal times, again, every 3 to 4 hours. Consistent meals help our bodies develop those reliable hunger cues, which is really important, so that we're better able to identify and respond to them in a way that suits our body's needs. So consistent nourishment builds trust with our body by letting it know that you are able to nourish it regularly, which will help avoid extra stress to our bodies. And in turn, our bodies won't increase production of that cortisol, that stress hormone. So the importance of carbohydrates. If we skip meals, we'll have low energy because carbohydrates are our body's main source of energy. We'll also have blood sugar fluctuations, and that can lead to mood swings. When we skip meals, we're not fueling our bodies, and our body's main and immediate source of energy are those carbohydrates. So when we're not eating, we do not have those carbohydrates available for energy. So we'll often experience low energy depending on how long we go without eating. Our blood sugar can drop. There are many symptoms of low blood sugar, but mood swings is definitely one of a lot of people experience, such as anxiety, really easily irritable, and our confusion or brain fog. Also, research has shown that regularly eating breakfast has been shown to help people maintain a healthy body weight. So that's our next one, regularly eating breakfast. This is a great habit to get into. For people who have a regular schedule and they work during the day, I usually recommend breakfast as the biggest meal of the day. It gets you started and fuels your brain and your body for the day coming. So yes, it's very important to make sure that we're eating breakfast. And also breakfast marks the end of the sleep period. So we want to make sure that we are fueling up for the day. Okay. Then also carbohydrates and serotonin we're going to talk about. So carbohydrates naturally increase the production of serotonin. And serotonin is our neurotransmitter essential for elevating mood, producing a calming effect, and suppressing our appetite. It's our feel-good neurotransmitter. So carbohydrates can affect levels of serotonin, but only indirectly. So the amino acid tryptophan, which is found in a lot of our protein foods, is the building block for serotonin, which helps us produce that serotonin. So you may be asking, why is it important to eat carbohydrates if by consuming protein, we're getting tryptophan to make serotonin? When individuals follow a high protein, low carbohydrate diet, there are many amino acids that we're consuming, because amino acids are the building blocks of protein, not just tryptophan. So the tryptophan must cross our blood-brain barrier to increase our serotonin levels in the brain. Protein is made up of, like I said, a lot of different amino acids, and tryptophan is not a great competitor. So very little is able to cross that blood-brain barrier unless carbohydrate is present. This results in a gradual decrease of serotonin. So carbohydrates cause the body to release more insulin, which promotes amino acid absorption and leaves tryptophan in the blood. If protein is consumed with carbohydrates, then the carbohydrate will drive the majority of our amino acids into the muscle. Thus, the tryptophan is able to cross our blood-brain barrier much easier to produce that serotonin. I know that was a mouthful, but yes. So we definitely want to make sure we're having a little bit protein, not too much, but we're making sure we're having carbohydrates. Okay, that's really important for serotonin production. However, there are no guarantees that you will change levels of serotonin by simply adjusting your carbohydrate protein intake. Other nutritional variables, as well as factors unrelated to your diet, such as sleep, exercise, also influence that serotonin production. When individuals who are sensitive to lower serotonin levels follow a low carbohydrate diet, their bodies don't have enough carbohydrates and protein to make that neurotransmitter. If they continue to limit their carbohydrates, their serotonin levels will decrease, and this causes a change in brain chemistry and can reduce serotonin. Okay, so we definitely want to make sure that we're having enough carbohydrates with our meals to sustain that serotonin production. All right, so this is about timing of meals and snacks to help support healthy cortisol levels and energy. So the timing of your meals and snacks is remarkably important to how you feel during the day and how you sleep at night. Cortisol, our stress hormone, has a particular circadian rhythm that is affected by sleep based on normal physiological. As you can see on this chart, low levels of cortisol are present at the initial part of sleep, whereas there is an increase right around breakfast time, so right before you wake up. And it ends the sleep period, which reaches its peak just minutes before the individual wakes up. Under normal conditions, without any stressors, cortisol is secreted by the adrenal glands into the bloodstream in a circadian and ultradian rhythm in humans. The peak level secretion occurs in the morning, usually around 7 or 8 a.m., which is considered the active phase, while its lowest secretion is around 2 to 4 a.m. at night. This chart demonstrates the circadian rhythm of cortisol. This periodic secretion is controlled by the circadian clock. And chrononutrition is actually an emerging field of nutritional science that aims to understand how timing of food intake may impact our health by affecting our circadian rhythm. So that's definitely an ongoing field of study. And a lot of us skip meals or eat at erratic intervals when we're under stress. Such inconsistency can be concerning because long periods without food causes our blood sugar to decrease, as we already talked about. This can also cause our bodies to produce more cortisol to help regulate the drop in blood sugar while simultaneously creating more stress in our bodies. So if you skip a meal, your body sees this as a small emergency. As a result, of your cortisol levels will increase. And again, cortisol, for some people, it will make them eat more, for others, eat less. But it's definitely important to make sure that we're eating at regular intervals so we're not increasing that cortisol level. And if you skip the main meal, the first meal of the day, which is breakfast, it literally means break fast. So you're breaking that fast from a long night. The cortisol levels, which are highest at 7 a.m., will not have been reduced. And a chronically high level of circulating cortisol increases fat storage and raises the risk of obesity. So since abdominal fat also tends to increase cortisol levels, this can lead to a vicious and unhealthy cycle, especially in women. There's little doubt that increased stress and or cortisol can cause increased abdominal fat and weight gain. So those who regularly skip breakfast are more susceptible to that weight gain and more worrying, more stress in that cortisol, and it increases your risk of high blood pressure and cholesterol levels, as well as heart disease and diabetes. So again, of course, our physical health connects to our mental health. So if we're at increased risks for all these, we have higher cortisol levels, we're more stressed, we're skipping meals, so we may be hungry throughout the day. This can all have a big impact on our mood. It's kind of like a domino effect. So delaying or skipping breakfast is associated with a higher likelihood of mood disorders among adults, according to a new study published in the Journal of Psychological Medicine. Research has shown that a healthy diet is linked to a lower risk of depression. Also, I often hear this, but when we skip meals, we're not saving calories. A lot of my clients will say they're saving calories, or eating one less meal per day will help them reach a goal weight if their goal is to lose weight. What you're doing when you're skipping a meal is making yourself hungrier and increasing your risk of overeating at another meal. When our bodies are stressed or you've had a long or tough day, many people will gravitate towards more quick and easy and comforting foods like salty chips, a pint of ice cream, or a large order of greasy French fries. It can be momentarily comforting overall, but to eat these carb-laden fatty foods that send serotonin levels up, dousing the brain's stress hormone, cortisol, and lending a momentary sense of calm might be beneficial or appealing at the moment, but it's not going to impact us greatly overall. According to the American Psychology Association, 39% of adults say they've overeaten or eaten unhealthy foods in the past month because of stress. Almost half of those stress eaters report engaging in this kind of emotional binging on a weekly basis or more often. And a recent study shows that women feel more emotionally down after eating junk food than men do. So that's definitely something to note. So there is a definite connection between stress and our appetite, which can adversely affect our mood. Researchers have found that diets high in the following foods can profoundly affect the circadian production of cortisol. So a lot of our animal proteins, refined sugars, salt, and fat. Whereas diets rich in fruits and vegetables are thought to promote the healthy cortisol production rhythms needed for sound, regular sleep, and a regular healthy diet. So no foods contain the stress hormone cortisol. Cortisol, again, is that stress hormone our bodies produce, but there are foods that affect cortisol levels in the body. Here's how to eat to help manage your cortisol levels and how stressed you may feel. So high blood sugar can spike cortisol levels. So if you're stressed out, anchor each meal with some protein and fiber to help slow down the absorption of carbohydrates from that meal. So I always recommend balancing your carbohydrates with some protein and fiber. Foods high in vitamin C also support your adrenal glands, which in turn support healthy cortisol levels. So some of our foods that are higher in vitamin C would be citrus fruits, tomatoes, red and green peppers, kiwi, broccoli, strawberries, Brussels sprouts, and cantaloupe, to name a few. And then sleep is also the best defense against stress. So sleep is also a really good strategy against weight gain. And since sleep helps lower that cortisol, and that's insulin, the fat storage hormone, and helps prevent insulin resistance, sleep boosts our growth hormone to build muscle mass, and leptin, which curbs our hunger, our cravings for carbohydrates. So sleep is also really important for our immunity, fertility, and mood overall. The amount of sleep you need depends on your age. So typically for teenagers, about 13 to 18 years of age, you're looking at 8 to 10 hours per day for sleep. Adults ages 18 to 60 need approximately 7 or more hours per night. Adults 61 to 64 years of age need about 7 to 9 hours of sleep per night. And ages 65 and older need about 7 to 8 hours of sleep per night. So it depends on your age, how much sleep is estimated that you need. And a lot of people do not get enough sleep based off of what I've seen with my clients specifically. But it is really important. It affects our health in so many different aspects. So another thing, try not to diet. Studies show that dieting is stressful and therefore boosts our cortisol levels. Typically, I like to recommend people focus on lifestyle changes as opposed to dieting or restricting specific foods. Eating at the right times of the day, breakfast, lunch, snacks, dinner, really important. And an early dinner actually helps keep cortisol on track. So not eating too late as well. Yeah, no, it's fine. The cortisol chart is fine. Okay. So now we're switching to the mindful eating cycle. So mindful eating is maintaining an in-the-moment awareness of the food and drink you put into your body. Okay, it involves observing how the food makes you feel and the signals your body sends about taste, satisfaction, and fullness. So paying attention to how you feel when you eat and what you eat is one of the first steps in making sure you're getting well-balanced meals and snacks. Since many of us don't pay close attention to our eating habits, many dietitians, myself included, will recommend keeping a food journal. Documenting what, where, and when you eat is a great way to gain insight into your patterns. If you currently have or had an eating disorder or pattern of disordered eating in the past, I usually advise speaking with a therapist and dietitian before you decide to log your food intake. But again, for someone who does not have a history with disordered eating or an eating disorder, this is a great way to track why you're eating certain foods. So maybe in the afternoon, you're feeling very low in energy and you're just grabbing something on your way home and you're going to a fast food restaurant. And maybe you're picking up a hamburger and fries. Probably not the healthiest option for most of us. We're getting a lot of saturated fat, a lot of sodium, and you're probably just grabbing that because it's really easy for you. So what could you do instead if you see that this is a trend in your food journal? You could definitely pack a lunch or a snack with you to hold you over until dinner, right? So definitely taking stock of why you're choosing to eat certain foods or when you're finding that you're low in energy or you're grabbing a snack, and trying to incorporate healthy ideas or healthy snacks and healthy meals, and establishing a healthy eating pattern for yourself is really important. And that's how mindful eating can definitely help. If you find that you overeat when stressed, which a lot of people do. It may be helpful to stop and think why you're doing that. Are you stressed? Is there another way that you can take down that stress level besides eating your feelings? By doing this, you may discover what's really bothering you, especially if you write down your emotions when you're keeping your food log. So you're understanding, okay, I'm eating this a lot of the times when I'm stressed. Maybe I need to work on my stress or find a healthier snack food when I'm stressed out. Sometimes stress and depression are severe and can't be managed alone. So for some, eating disorders may develop if you find it hard to control your eating habits, whether you're eating too much or too little, your health may be in jeopardy. So in this case, you should seek professional counseling. It's never a sign of weakness or failure. It's always something that shows strength, seeking help when you need it. So again, for someone with an eating disorder, disordered eating habits, I don't necessarily recommend keeping a food journal. Talk to a therapist, a doctor, a dietitian, and we'll be able to help with that. Okay, under eating and overeating. So this is a big topic. So under eating, when someone is consuming fewer calories than their body needs to function, under eating can cause weight loss, impaired growth in children, hair loss, reproductive difficulties, and of course, since we're talking about food and its effect on mood, fatigue, depression, irritability, impaired ability to concentrate. So under eating, which is consuming fewer calories than your body needs, can really impact your mood. And a lot of people who are chronic dieters or are trying to lose weight will consistently undereat, and they're wondering why they're not losing weight. You're not giving your body the nutrition that it needs, and we need to eat to lose weight. So under eating is really an issue for a lot of people, and it can really impact your mood. So definitely making sure that we're getting those calories and that we need. If you're unsure of what that calorie range would be, seeing a dietitian would be a great option because we can help and also give you a good healthy eating path if weight loss is your goal. Overeating. So when someone is consuming more calories than their body needs or expends, and again, this can cause weight gain, fatigue, heartburn, gas, bloating, difficulty sleeping, metabolic syndrome. If you're overweight or obese, increased risk for diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. So again, in the bold, those are big ones that will impact your mood, because if you're not feeling well, you're very tired, you have heartburn, you have gas or bloating, you haven't been able to sleep well, those all impact your mood. So definitely being mindful of how much you're eating throughout the day. It's important to meet your calorie needs. But if you're mindlessly munching throughout the day to deal with stress or emotions, that can also be an issue and impact your mood as well, and overall health, as we can see with increased risk for diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. So that's definitely something that you want to address as well. Okay. So under eating and overeating, skipping meals. So if you skip meals, like I said, your blood sugar fluctuates. You have decreased energy levels, which can lead to increased risk for depression and anxiety and mood swings. If you cut out entire food groups, so a lot of people think carbohydrates are bad for them, and they'll do some kind of trendy diet. When you cut out an entire food group or severely decrease the amount that you're consuming, those food group restrictions can lead to nutrition deficiencies or inadequate calorie intakes. So you really want to avoid jumping on the latest trend or fad diet, because this can really greatly impact your health in ways that you might not see. Eating too many refined carbohydrates. So what I mean by refined carbohydrates is that a lot of the nutrition is taken out of them in food processing. So a lot of our white breads, white crackers, white pastas, refined sugars, so simple sugars. If you're eating a lot of those, you can experience energy highs and lows due to that inconsistent blood sugar. You can have higher intake of added sugars, which impacts your GI health and gut microbiome, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and also your mood. So you want to make sure that you're eating a variety of food sources and not just sticking with convenience foods or a lot of refined carbohydrates, which a lot of people do consume in excess because they're quick and easy. And a lot of people these days are very busy, working one, maybe multiple jobs, juggling family and life. There's so many things that impact why we choose to eat what we eat and when. But yes, definitely eating too many refined carbohydrates can be a large issue as well. So right here, we're just looking at blood sugar and carbohydrates. So we briefly talked about how low blood sugar levels can affect our mood. The first graph on the left shows us the natural fluctuations that we experience throughout the day, naturally increasing as we eat and decreasing afterwards, our blood sugar. Now it's time to talk about the difference between carbohydrates that fuel you and carbohydrates that rob you of energy. So our refined carbohydrates that I talked about, carbs that have a lot that don't have a lot of fiber or nutrients, they're often taken out during that food processing stage. So you're going to see that on the chart on the right. They're going to be that yellow line. So our refined carbohydrates, like those white breads, white crackers, pastas, and then our simple sugars. So again, our simple sugars are going to be a lot of candies, anything with a lot of added sugars. So that's going to be that red line. So you'll see the sharp increase with the red line and then that sharp decrease. So you're momentarily getting high energy, but then you're going to experience low energy because you don't really have anything to sustain or release that energy at a slower rate. Whereas the refined carbohydrates, you can definitely see it increases and then decreases at a little bit of a slower rate. So they're a little bit better for us than those simple sugars. But then you will see that blue line. So that is our complex carbohydrates. So our complex carbohydrates are going to be more nutritious carbohydrates. So they're going to have more fiber, which are really important to help control our blood sugar. And they're also going to have more nutrients. So fiber and protein are two things I always recommend having when you're having carbohydrates. So both of those are going to help slow down our release of sugar into the blood. So carbohydrates break down into glucose. And when we have fiber and protein with our carbohydrates, we're going to have a slower release of glucose into the blood because fiber and protein take a little bit longer for our body to digest. So when you're having those carbohydrates with the fiber and protein, you're going to have a slower increase in that blood sugar, and it's going to be more stable. And you're not going to have a sharp increase and a sharp decrease in your blood sugar. So that's another way to help decrease those mood swings and that blood sugar fluctuation. Okay, you can see in the green section, this is where we want our blood sugar to be ideally in this range. And you can see that the complex carbohydrates maintain that more than the simple sugars and the refined carbohydrates that really spike the blood sugar. All right, so did you know that glucose is the simplest form of energy and supplies the fuel for most of your body's energy needs, about 98%? Fun little fact. And then we have our unbalanced macronutrients. So our macronutrients are our carbohydrates, our fat, and our protein. So each macronutrient has a unique role in the body. Our carbs are mainly our source of energy. Our proteins are a big structural component of our bodies, and fat are great for storage and absorption of nutrients. So they all have a role in a lot of different aspects of our body, but these are just the ones that are the main source. The truth is that all our foods fuel us, okay? Not just carbohydrates, but also protein and fat. They all play unique supporting roles in healing and sustaining our physical bodies. So carbs might be the main source of energy, but we also get energy from protein and fats. If you're eating too much or too little of one macronutrient, you could be causing hormonal imbalances in your body. Because again, our macronutrients and our micronutrients that are in our food have a big role in our hormones and production of those hormones and release and absorption, all of that. So making sure you're eating a variety of sources, but also focusing on making sure you're having good sources of these macronutrients and not eliminating one. For example, one fad diet that starts with a K comes to mind, the keto diet, which I typically don't recommend. That's a very low carbohydrate diet. So we're severely decreasing our main source of energy. And a lot of people who follow this diet might not be having the healthiest sources of fat because fat is really increased. So we could be causing ourselves some hormonal imbalances. We could be causing ourselves to be hungrier because we're not having a good source of carbohydrates, tired, which could affect our mood as well. So definitely making sure that you're balancing out your macronutrients is really important. And again, trying not to follow those fad diets because they're definitely not the healthiest idea. Okay, so here are our hormones and neurotransmitters affected by nutrition. So we have insulin, which is produced by our pancreas. It helps lower our blood sugar levels. It stimulates metabolism of glucose, protein, and fat. Then we have our cortisol, which we talked about already. It's our stress hormone. It's a steroid hormone, one of the glucocorticoids made in the cortex of the adrenal glands and then released into the blood. Cortisol is often known as the stress hormone because production of cortisol is increased when your body is under pressure or under stress. So to help your body respond appropriately, essentially. Cortisol can help control the body's blood sugar levels, helps act as an anti-inflammatory agent, influences our memory formation, controls salt and water balance, and influencing blood pressure as well. So there's a lot more than just the stress hormone that a lot of people think cortisol is. And then we have ghrelin. This is a hormone that is produced and released mainly by the stomach, with small amounts released by the small intestine, pancreas, and our brain. So ghrelin has numerous functions. It's termed our hunger hormone because it stimulates appetite, increases our food intake, and promotes fat storage. So ghrelin has also been shown to act on regions of the brain involved in our reward processing, such as the amygdala. Ghrelin also stimulates the release of growth hormone from the pituitary gland, which, unlike ghrelin itself, breaks down fat tissue and causes the buildup of muscle. So ghrelin also has protective effects on the cardiovascular system and also plays a role in the control of insulin release. Ghrelin levels are primarily regulated by food intake. Levels of ghrelin in the blood rise just before eating and when fasting, with the timing of these rises being affected by our normal meal times. Hence, ghrelin is thought to play a role in mealtime hunger pangs. So when you have that hunger cue and the need to begin eating. Levels of ghrelin increase when fasting in line with increased hunger and are lower in individuals with a higher body weight compared with lean individuals, which suggests that ghrelin could be involved in the long-term regulation of body weight. Eating reduces concentrations of ghrelin. Different nutrients slow down ghrelin's release to varying degrees. Carbohydrates and protein, they restrict the production and release of ghrelin to a greater extent than fat. And ghrelin levels increase after dieting, which may explain why diet-induced weight loss can be difficult to maintain. We will get to questions at the end. I see a couple people asking questions. And then we have leptin. So leptin is a hormone secreted from fat cells and adipose tissue that helps to regulate body weight. The name leptin is derived from the Greek word leptos, meaning thin. It is sometimes referred to as our fat controller or our satiety hormone. So it's kind of the opposite of the ghrelin. Leptin signals to the brain, in particular to an area called the hypothalamus. Leptin does not affect food intake from meal to meal, but instead acts to alter our food intake and control energy expenditure over the long term. Leptin has a more profound effect when we lose weight and levels of the hormone fall. So this actually stimulates a huge appetite and increased food intake. The hormone helps us to maintain our normal weight. And unfortunately for dieters, it makes it hard to lose those extra pounds. Because leptin is produced by fat cells, the amount of leptin release is directly related to the amount of body fat. So the more fat an individual has, the more leptin they will have circulating in their blood. Leptin levels increase if an individual increases their fat mass over a period of time, and leptin levels decrease if an individual decreases their fat mass over a period of time. Unfortunately, obese people have unusually high levels of leptin. This is because in some obese people, the brain does not respond to leptin. So they keep eating despite adequate or excessive fat stores. This is often called leptin resistance. So this causes the fat cells to produce even more leptin. It's similar to the way people with type 2 diabetes have unusually high levels of insulin, and as their body is resistant to the effects of insulin. So the cause of leptin resistance is still unclear, but it's definitely unfortunate that the heavier you are, the more leptin you typically have. And the next two are not hormones, they're neurotransmitters. So the difference between a hormone and a neurotransmitter is that hormones are your body's chemical messengers. They travel in your bloodstream to your tissues, organs. They work slowly over time and affect many different processes in our bodies, including growth and development, metabolism. Whereas neurotransmitters are chemical messengers. So within the brain that allow the communication between our nerve cells. Our neurotransmitters are passed through our brain via passageways called our synapses. The synapses are responsible for passing our chemical messengers, such as neurotransmitters, between our neurons. And neurons are just specialized cells that process information. There are many different kinds of neurons in our brain, ranging from neurons that control our motor functions to those that interpret data that we receive from our 5 different senses. So we definitely have a lot of different neurons. Serotonin. So serotonin is one type of neurotransmitter. This one plays a role in digestion, sexual function, bone density, blood clotting, and emotional regulation. When you have the right amount of serotonin inside your body, it's easier to have stable moods and a sense of well-being. Most experts do agree that people who are depressed do not necessarily have lower levels of serotonin than everyone else. However, an increase in serotonin level has been shown to be effective in many patients with depression. In the short term, this increase in serotonin is effective in the long and does help with mood stabilization and feelings of well-being. But the reason the increase in serotonin is effective in the long term is that serotonin actually helps to build new and to strengthen existing neural pathways related to our emotions. In other words, it's not necessarily the increased hit of serotonin that helps people with depression experience relief, but rather the fact that areas previously underused in their brains are reinvigorated, which is really interesting. Then we have our dopamine. So dopamine is another type of neurotransmitter, and it affects how we experience pleasure. When we do something that we enjoy, dopamine helps to activate our pleasure center in our brain. Dopamine helps us to enjoy not just different things, but also helps us stay motivated. When we have the right amount of dopamine in our systems, we're more likely to experience our pleasure center lighting up, you might hear, when we accomplish something. So it's common for people with depression to have low levels of dopamine. So that's a lot of hormones and neurotransmitters that we just talked about. Unbalanced hormones can cause moodiness, weight gain, fatigue, sleeplessness, and increased disease risk. There are like approximately 200 different hormones in the human body. There are chemical messengers that control so many different systems in our body: our metabolism, immune system, menstrual cycle, reproduction. And consuming certain foods can provide the nutrients that we need in order to facilitate the production of hormones to keep them regular. So the question is, can our diet impact our neurotransmitters that affect mood? And the answer is yes. Protein consumption from foods like fish, beef, chicken, turkey, tofu, beans, eggs, unsweetened yogurts have been linked to higher levels of dopamine and norepinephrine, which are brain chemicals, are neurotransmitters that play a role in our mood, motivation, and concentration. So protein can help increase levels of dopamine. The brain uses the amino acid tryptophan that we talked about earlier to produce serotonin, which is a neurotransmitter largely responsible for our feelings of happiness and well-being. And plant-based sources of tryptophan include leafy greens, sunflower seeds, watercress, soybeans, pumpkin seeds, mushrooms, broccoli, peas. While meats such as turkey also contain the amino acid, the body can have a difficult time converting it to serotonin. Because of the competition from the other amino acids often prevent that tryptophan from entering the brain, resulting in low serotonin production. So that implies that potentially plant-based sources of protein, which usually have a little bit less protein and less amino acids than animal-based protein, might be a little bit more beneficial to produce that serotonin. Scientists have found in meals rich in carbohydrates promote that increase in insulin production, which allows that muscle cell to absorb competing amino acids. We talked about this earlier as well, so that the blood-brain barrier is able to, the tryptophan is able to cross the blood-brain barrier and increase that serotonin production. A diet high in protein and animal foods can limit serotonin production, as we just discussed. A healthy approach for ideal levels of tryptophan in the brain is to focus on those plant-based proteins with generous amounts of complex carbohydrates. So again, our complex carbohydrates are going to be our vegetables, fruits, whole grains, and legumes, or beans. And with this pattern in place, there's sufficient serotonin produced to maintain feelings of well-being. This serves as one of the many good reasons why a plant-based diet is ideal for our mental health. So The question I asked earlier, can our diet impact our neurotransmitters that affect mood? And again, the answer is yes. Again, nutritional science is always changing and updating and emerging. But so there's probably a lot of ways that we don't even know that these are impacting our mood. Okay, ghrelin and leptin, we talked about these. So again, leptin is that fat controller or the satiety hormone. So you can see in this little cartoon, when you're satisfied, no more leptin, you are able to finish eating. Leptin has a more profound effect when we lose weight and levels of that hormone fall. Similarly, it's a huge appetite and increased food intake. The hormone helps us to maintain our normal weight, and unfortunately for dieters makes it hard to lose those extra few pounds. So at a healthy weight, it helps us. At a higher weight, it tends to act against us. And then we have ghrelin, is a hormone that's termed the hunger hormone because it stimulates that appetite. So it increases our food intake and promotes that fat storage. So when your blood glucose drops and you don't have enough energy, you're releasing that ghrelin so that you are promoted to eat. Okay, and then we have leptin and dopamine. So these are just fun little cartoons, but dopamine, also that feel-good neurotransmitter. The brain releases it when we eat food that we crave, contributing to feelings of pleasure and satisfaction as part of that reward system we talked about. But it's also an important neurochemical to boost mood, motivation, and attention. Helps regulate movement, learning, and emotional responses as well. Whereas leptin acts to alter that food intake and control energy. Leptin's the satiety hormone. Leptin makes us feel satisfied, full, and content. So it's which one are you eating for? Are you eating a lot of those foods to for the dopamine, that feel-good neurotransmitter that makes us crave all those foods, or leptin? Are you choosing a healthier diet and focusing on everything in moderation with leptin? Okay, nutrient deficiencies. So this is a big topic as well. They can have a really big impact on our mood, especially for the nutrients listed here are vitamin B6, vitamin B9, which is folate, vitamin B12, vitamin D, iron, and zinc. So for example, vitamin B6, it's our bioactive form. It's needed to make brain neurotransmitters. So we talked about some of those. And particularly needed for production of serotonin and dopamine, also norepinephrine, which we talked about briefly, and melatonin. So a deficiency, if someone has a deficiency in vitamin B6, this can contribute to symptoms of anxiety, irritability, feeling overwhelmed, depression, brain fog, short-term memory loss, insomnia, vivid dreams, and water retention. So taking a small dose of B6 can dramatically improve mood in people who are vitamin B6 deficient. People who have an increased risk of becoming vitamin B6 deficient are people with digestive problems like IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, IBD, celiac disease. Also those who drink a lot of alcohol, because alcohol will decrease our vitamin B6 levels. People who are on birth control, people who have diabetes, impaired kidney function, and autoimmune diseases, and in the elderly. So these are people more at risk for a vitamin B6 deficiency. Vitamin B6 can be found in a lot of our animal-based products. So our turkey, chicken, wild salmon. It's in our lentils, beans, spinach, carrots, wheatgrass, bananas, just to name a few. And then we have vitamin B9. So this is folate. This is our naturally occurring form of B9. So folate is found in foods like our asparagus, our eggs, leafy greens, and people with depression tend to have lower blood folate levels than people who are not depressed. Early research shows that adding folate to antidepressants may improve the odds of a positive response to those antidepressants. So it could be used in collaboration with an antidepressant, especially if the antidepressant is not working for the patient. It could also be needing a medication switch. Then we have vitamin B12 and other B vitamins. So a lot of our Bs play a big role in producing brain chemicals that affect mood, so our neurotransmitters and other brain functions. So low levels of B12 and other B vitamins, such as like the 6 and the folate that we mentioned, may be linked to depression. And low levels can vary, but usually resulting from eating a poor diet or not being able to absorb the vitamins you consume. So again, if you have any GI issues, that could be another reason. Older adults, vegetarians, vegans, and people who have undergone weight loss surgery, and people with, again, those digestive disorders such as celiac disease or Crohn's may have trouble getting enough B12. Sometimes, or even if someone has an ulcer. Sometimes a B12 deficiency occurs for unknown reasons, but usually the ones I listed are the reason. Your doctor may order a blood test to check your levels of B12 if they suspect a deficiency. If you have a B12 deficiency, taking a daily supplement that includes B12 may help your body get those nutrients it needs. But the best way to make sure you're getting enough B12 is, of course, trying to get it from your food first. For certain people who are more prone to that vitamin B12 deficiency, you might want both. So you might want to take the supplement, but also increase foods for vitamin B12. So vitamin B12 is plentiful in our animal products. So our fish, lean meats, poultry, eggs, so healthier proteins for us, and also our low fat and fat-free milks. A lot of breakfast cereals are also good sources of B12 because they're fortified with it. So that means it's added to the product. So it's not normally a good source, but they fortified the food with the B12. Keep in mind the role of B vitamins in depression isn't clear as to sometimes why it helps, and more research is needed. So they're still researching like doses and supplement use to help with mood disorders and depression with those B vitamins. And then we have vitamin D. So this is a big one. It's a hot research topic for a lot of people. Vitamin D, while getting enough vitamin D isn't a guarantee that you'll avoid depression, it may significantly reduce your risk of depressive symptoms, okay? So low concentrations of vitamin D in your body are associated with depression, and the lower your vitamin D levels are, the higher your risk. The widespread distribution of our vitamin D receptors in the brain may play a role in vitamin D's effects on our mood, which is interesting. Chances are not getting enough vitamin D. Most people aren't. An estimated 1 billion people worldwide have vitamin D deficiency or insufficiency. I see that with a lot of my clients. A lot of people are on a vitamin D supplement because due to recent blood work, they found out that they are vitamin D deficient. Some individuals at high risk for vitamin D include those living far from the equator, those with conditions such as obesity, liver disease, celiac disease, renal disease, a lot of elderly patients, and also patients who are not people who are not going outside, essentially. In addition to its well-known role in calcium absorption, vitamin D actually activates genes that regulate the immune system and also release those neurotransmitters that we talked about, dopamine and serotonin. So a lot comes back to our dopamine and serotonin that affect our brain function and development. Researchers have found vitamin D receptors on a handful of cells located in this brain, the same regions that are linked with depression. And also there's something to note, seasonal affective disorder. This is a mood disorder featuring depressive symptoms. It occurs during the dark times of the year, so winter, so essentially now when there's relatively less sunshine, and a lot of people aren't spending a lot of time outdoors. This often coincides with the sudden drop in vitamin D levels in the body because, again, we can actually make vitamin D in our skin from sunlight exposure. So when your skin is exposed to sunlight, it manufactures our vitamin D. The sun's ultraviolet B rays interact with a protein called 7-DHC in the skin, and then it converts it into vitamin D, which is the active form of vitamin D. So a lot of people who are not getting the sun exposure, especially in winter, maybe they have a seasonal affective disorder, they're not spending time outside because it's too cold out, possibly, or just because it's more of a depressing time of year. They're probably getting a lot less vitamin D than they normally would have in the summer months when a lot of people are spending more time outdoors. One thing I get a lot of questions about is, okay, so should I stop wearing sunscreen? That is a big topic, and no, you should not stop wearing sunscreen. Yes, sunscreen does block some of those rays and some of our ability to absorb vitamin D, but not completely. So you definitely want to make sure that you're wearing sunscreen to protect against the harmful effects of the sun and help prevent skin cancer. Because if you want your vitamin D and you think you're going to absorb it best by leaving off the sunscreen, then you spend a lot of time outdoors, you could develop skin cancer. So trying to solve one problem could create another. So you want to make sure that you're still protecting your skin from those harmful rays. The RDA, so the recommended daily allowance for vitamin D for adults 19 years and older, is usually about 600 international units for men and women. And for adults 70 years and older, it's usually about 800 international units daily. But since a lot of people are finding that they're vitamin D deficient, your primary care physician may recommend a higher dose between 1,000 to 5,000 IUs, international units, depending on what your blood work reveals to them. So that's a possibility as well. I know many people who are on 1,000 international units plus. You can get vitamin D from food, but it's not found in a lot of food sources. So the best food sources of vitamin D are the flesh of fatty fishes. So our salmon, mackerel, tuna, sardines, fish liver oil. So if you take a fish oil supplement, those are great options. Vitamin D is also usually fortified in a lot of different foods, which means it's added to the food. It normally didn't have it. So some of the common foods that are fortified with vitamin D are things like cereal, breakfast cereals, are milk, cow's milk, and orange juice. All right, and then we have iron. So iron is actually, there's actually an association exists between low iron and mental health. So not getting enough iron from your diet or having a condition that restricts its absorption can result in psychological problems such as and physiological problems. So like if you have iron deficiency, that can cause depression, reduced cognitive function, and impaired growth and development in children. So iron deficiency symptoms may be mild at first, but they can be extreme as well. So extreme tiredness, exhaustion, that's usually a sign of iron deficiency or anemia. If your body does not get enough oxygen from hemoglobin, your muscles and your body does not get enough, will be deprived. Your tissues will be deprived of that oxygen and energy. And nearly half of people with iron deficiency experience physical fatigue and lack of energy. So those are two big symptoms right there. And anemia, left untreated, could cause psychological symptoms such as physiological symptoms such as iron deficiency depression, cognitive disorders, psychiatric conditions, and can make them worse as well, existing conditions. Most sources of dietary iron are in the non-heme form. So we have non-heme and then we have heme sources. So our non-heme form would be, non-heme iron would be things like our fortified cereals, beans, lentils, tofu, spinach, a lot of our dried fruits, prune juice, certain breads, broccoli, and certain nuts will also have some non-heme iron. Whereas our heme iron, which is what we want for anemia, typically, depending on the type of anemia, meat such as beef and poultry, those are really great sources of that heme iron, as well as beef or chicken liver or other organ meats, which a lot of people don't typically eat. Seafood such as oysters, clams, mussels, canned sardines, and canned tuna. So those are better sources for heme iron. So iron is also really important, especially if someone is prone to a deficiency in iron or they are anemic. Then we have zinc. So zinc, not only has zinc deficiency been shown to induce depression-like and anxiety-like behaviors, but supplementation has actually been used as a treatment for major depression with zinc. So zinc administration improves the efficacy of certain antidepressant drugs in depressed patients and may have a particular role to play in treatment-resistant patients. So people who are less likely to respond to depression medications. Several research studies have found that increased serum blood concentrations of zinc were actually associated with decreases in depression and anxiety. So zinc is also a great option, and eating a variety of food sources is also important to get zinc. So some examples of food sources that are rich in zinc would be our whole grains and our milk products. They're really good sources of zinc. A lot of our ready-to-eat breakfast cereals are fortified with zinc. And then naturally, oysters, red meat, poultry, they're also good sources of zinc. Baked beans, chickpeas, nuts, like cashews or almonds. Those are good sources of zinc as well. So nutrition and depression, we talked about some of these already. So we talked about caloric intake. We talked about our omega-3s, vitamin D, B vitamins, zinc and iron. We're going to talk a little bit more about food insecurity and omega-3s. So caloric intake, we talked about briefly. We talked about how undereating and overeating can affect our blood sugar, which impacts our mood. So we know that the amount of calories we eat is important. Caloric intake is different for everyone. Again, it varies depending on your sex, your age, your physical activity level, and if you have weight loss or weight gain or weight maintenance goals. But two things that we haven't really talked about too much yet is food insecurity and omega-3s, which can definitely impact our nutrition and our mood and depression. So food insecurity. So for those of you who don't know, food insecurity is a household level economic and social condition of limited or uncertain access to adequate food. And actually, as of 2021, according to the USDA, more than 38 million people, including 12 million children in the US, were found to be food insecure, meaning they didn't have regular access to adequate food level. And hunger is an individual level physiological condition that may result from food insecurity and often does. And people who were found to be food insecure have a 257% higher risk of anxiety and a 253% higher risk of depression. This can be due to many factors, again, not just nutrition, because if someone's food insecure, they're probably very stressed, their cortisol levels are probably elevated, they're probably worried, especially if they have to provide for others. So there's so many reasons that they would be more prone to depression, but nutrition is definitely one of them as well. Not to mention that how lower income or food insecure individuals and families, they probably are limited with the types of food that they're able to purchase. And they're usually on some kind of budget for food and the benefits that they receive. So if they have SNAP benefits, WIC benefits, if they get their food from a food bank or shelter, oftentimes their food choices are dependent on what is donated or provided to them. So they typically have less control on the types of food they're eating, which could subject them to potential nutrient deficiencies, further increasing their risk for depression and anxiety. So this is also a big issue, and a lot more people are being affected by this, especially with the pandemic that's going on. More people are relying on food banks. So if you are able to, donating to a food bank is an option, a great option, especially if you're picking more nutritious foods to donate. But that's a big issue, and that can definitely affect our nutrition status and our ability to eat adequate amounts of food to stave off mood issues and depression. Then we have omega-3 fatty acids. So different mechanisms of action have been proposed as to why omega-3s may impact depression. Research is ongoing with this as well. For example, omega-3s can easily actually travel through our brain cell membrane and interact with mood-related molecules inside the brain, so more of our neurotransmitters. They also have an anti-inflammatory action that may relieve depression. There's a lot of different research ongoing in different aspects. Most studies have used omega-3s as add-on therapy for people who are taking prescription antidepressants, with the antidepressants having limited or no benefit, so potentially as a booster to help them. A lot of studies have and have not used omega-3s on their own. But definitely less studies have used omega-3s as a therapy for depression alone. So from the studies that I have read, clinical trials typically use EPA, which is a form of omega-3s, alone or in combination with DHA, another form of omega-3, at doses from about 0.5 to 1 grams per day to about 6 to 10 grams per day. So there's a variety of different research studies and how much they're using, how large the dose of the EPA and DHA are. So to give some perspective, 1 gram per day would correspond to about eating 3 salmon meals per week. A lot of meta-analysis, which are research that combines and analyzes research from a lot of different studies, they generally suggest that the omega-3s are effective, but the findings are not unanimous because of the variability with the doses that are used and the ratios of EPA to DHA. But based on current research, that has been evaluated, the most effective preparations appear to have at least 60% EPA relative to DHA. While DHA is thought to be less effective as an antidepressant, it may have protective effects against suicide. So research is definitely ongoing with those, but omega-3s are also a great option to help lower cholesterol. So a lot of physicians will also recommend that. So it may help with cholesterol and also may help with depression and mood disorders. It's also been studied in various mood disorders besides just depression, such as postpartum depression, which has some promising research, bipolar disorder, also for to prevent, propose to alleviate or prevent other psychiatric conditions such as schizophrenia, borderline personality disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, but those last few, research still needs to go a long way with those. They're less supported than depression and postpartum depression currently. When it comes to dose recommendations for omega-3s to help ease depression, doses for depression range from less than 1 gram per day to 10 grams per day, but most studies use doses between 1 to 2 grams per day. And omega-3s are actually generally safe and well tolerated. There's no real upper limit established. Some people may get some stomach upset from supplementing with omega-3s if you're not consuming fatty fish. And some people may get like a fish taste or fish burps from taking fish oil supplements. Those are usually the most common complaints, but they're less frequent these days thanks to manufacturing methods that help reduce impurities in the fish oil. But this is definitely a promising outlook for depression, potentially using a omega-3 supplement alone or in collaboration with an antidepressant medication. I always recommend talking to your primary care physician before taking a supplement to see if there are any medication interactions. Also, to discover possible reasons your primary care physician may not want you to take a new or additional supplement. So that's definitely a possibility as well. Then 3 food behaviors to improve mood. So we've established some of these already. Eat every 3 to 4 hours. Research has definitely proven this helps level out our moods and our blood sugar. Not skipping meals. So again, eating 3 hours every 3 to 4 hours doesn't necessarily mean someone's eating 3 to 4 meals. I mean, a meal every 3 to 4 hours. It could mean that they're snacking that frequently and they're not eating enough calories. So not skipping meals and making sure you're eating adequate amounts of calories are really important. And eating a variety of food sources, because we just talked about nutrient deficiencies. A lot of those nutrients are in a lot of different food sources. So covering your basis and eating a lot of fruits, a lot of vegetables, a lot of whole grains, good lean sources of meat. Those are all different food sources that are providing us with different nutrients. So it's important to eat a variety of food sources. Okay. Now we're going to be talking about the gut microbiome, which is a big topic. And again, research is really in its infancy when we're talking about the gut microbiome. But there's a lot of promising research and it's a very hot topic in nutritional research and just scientific research in general. So the microbiome consists of microbes that are both helpful and potentially harmful. So most are symbiotic, which means where both the human body and the microbiota benefit. So, and then some are in smaller numbers are pathogenic. So promoting disease, not the best for us. In a healthy body, pathogenic and symbiotic microbiota exists without problems. But if there is a disturbance in that balance brought on by infection, like in illness, certain diets, or prolonged use of antibiotics, dysbiosis can occur, which stops normal interactions. As a result, the body may become more susceptible to illness and disease. So we definitely want to make sure that we're eating a lot of healthy sources to promote that symbiotic atmosphere. One key role of the gut microbiota is degrading or breaking down the carbohydrates that we cannot digest into short chain fatty acids. So changes in our diet can rapidly change the gut microbiota depending on what we're eating. So generally a high fiber diet, which is low in saturated fats and sugars, is associated with a healthier gut microbiome. And it's characterized by a greater diversity of organisms, which can be beneficial for us. On the other hand, diets high in saturated fat and refined sugars with low fiber content reduce the microbial diversity, which can be bad for our health. Several studies have shown that depression is associated with changes in our gut microbiome. And emerging evidence actually suggests that gut microbiota can influence other behaviors through the microbiota gut-brain axis. Put simply, the gut and the brain communicate in part via the microbiota, which links the emotional and the cognitive centers of the brain with our intestinal functions. So this gut-brain axis is really interesting, and it's affecting a lot more than we had previously thought. A lot of the research is being done on animal studies right now, so it might not be applicable to human studies, but various animal studies suggest the gut microbiota could play a causal role in regulating behavior. This may be in due part to different microbiota profiles influencing the production of key transmitters such as serotonin, like our neurotransmitters. Of course, further research is needed to establish the relationship between a poor diet and the gut microbiota and our behavior changes and its impact. But in the long term, such knowledge may be harnessed to develop targeted therapeutic interventions to replace relevant microbiota diminished by an unhealthy lifestyle. So again, more fiber-rich foods are thought to promote healthy microbiota, and more simple carbohydrates, added sugars, ultra-processed foods are thought to essentially cause an issue with our digestive system and cause more of a pathogenic gut microbiome. So again, our human brain, so we have a lot of different neurons in our brain, and there's about 500 million neurons in our brain. These connections send information from your gut to your brain and back. And there's so much to study with the brain alone, but the brain-gut connection is just very interesting and very up and coming with research. And the microbiome in your gut is picky, so you have to be careful with what you feed it if you want to produce the feel-good neurotransmitters that we talked about, serotonin, dopamine. So our fibrous foods like our whole grains and legumes are really good. And then also probiotic rich foods, such as our plain yogurts without added sugars. Those are also really good as well. All right, another did you know? So did you know that the gut is the production factory of over 90% of our body's serotonin, so that feel-good hormone, and the brain pulls the remaining 10%. Since serotonin is a critical neurotransmitter that regulates our moods, this relationship shows that nutrition reaches beyond brain and gut structure itself and plays a pivotal role in the connection of our moods and thoughts. And there are approximately 100 trillion good and bad bacteria living inside your digestive system. So it's important to make sure that you're having a well-balanced diet so that you're able to promote a healthy gut microbiome. So again, this gut-brain axis influences our weights, bowel movements, our nutrient delivery, the microbial balance that we talked about, neurotransmitters, we talked about serotonin and dopamine, our stress and anxiety, and our mood and behavior. So there's a lot to talk about and a lot of research about that. But again, the gut microbiome research is still in its infancy, but at the moment, focusing on high fibrous foods is one example of eating for your gut microbiome. This one is just a research study that has promising results. So this was actually an interesting study that looked at a lot of different factors and took a lot of actual research studies and looked at different confounding results, essentially. So they were looking for investigating the links between diet and mood and influence of the gut microbiota on neurobiology and behavior, which is termed the microbiome gut-brain axis. Because diet is a large influencer of the gut microbiota composition and function, it's likely that changes in the gut microbiota contribute to how whole diet, and also individual components of someone's diet may affect depression and anxiety. So essentially, this study of gut microbiota affecting mental illness, mental health is relatively new, but a lot of studies are finding similar bullet points, essentially, of findings that high fibrous foods, more prebiotic and probiotic foods as well, will help create a more symbiotic, healthy gut microbiome. Scientists following this line of research have become increasingly convinced that to fully understand our emotions and behaviors, we need to study the gut as much as the brain, because again, that serotonin fact, the fact that most of the serotonin is in our gut as opposed to our brain, is a crazy scientific discovery that hasn't happened that long ago. So we have so much research to do in this area. We have not really talked about probiotics and prebiotics yet. So these are both really important for gut health. The difference between probiotics and prebiotics. So our probiotics are live microorganisms that are intended to maintain or improve the good bacteria, so that normal microflora in the body. They can be found in our yogurts, certain fermented foods, and dietary supplements. And then we have our prebiotics. So our prebiotics are foods, typically high fiber foods, that act as food for those microflora, so for that bacteria. So it's like essentially you're feeding yourself, but you're feeding your good bacteria as well, good and bad. Our prebiotics are used with the intention of improving the balance of these microorganisms. So going for more of that symbiotic balance. So foods rich in prebiotics include veggies, legumes, so our beans, our fruits such as bananas and watermelon, nuts and seeds. And then on the flip side, our probiotic foods are a lot of our yogurts with live cultures, kefir, if you've ever seen kefir in the dairy section, a lot of our fermented foods such as sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha, and unpasteurized pickled vegetables. So those are some examples of things that we could potentially increase in our diet to help promote that healthy gut flora. Because again, that gut bacteria also produce hundreds of neurochemicals that the brain uses to regulate our mental processes, including our memory, our ability to learn, and our mood. So we do want to make sure that we're taking care of our gut as much as our brain and overall health. Okay, here are just some examples of prebiotic and probiotic snacks. So we have bananas and yogurt, our core power bars, smoothies, apples and cottage cheese, for example. We have the psychobiotic food pyramid. So this is just a proposed food model that actually shows what we should increase in our diet and decrease to promote that healthy gut microbiome. So again, a lot of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, olive oils, our nuts, seeds, legumes, beans, spices, our fish and seafood, healthy lean proteins, a little bit less frequently our poultry, eggs, and dairy, and then meats and sweets. So this is just a proposed food model. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to eat this way, but for some people who are having some gastrointestinal issues or who do suffer from some mood imbalances or depression, this may be one way to help you. And then possible symptoms of an unhealthy gut. So bloating, diarrhea, constipation, gas, discomfort, pain, heartburn, acid reflux. These are just some examples of an unhealthy gut. But again, this could be to other conditions that pre-existing conditions that you already have. So it's not just symptoms of an unhealthy gut, but if you are experiencing any of these, it could be due to diet or also medication changes. So overall, evidence suggests that we should be promoting health forward diets. So increasing our intakes of fruits, vegetables, fish, nuts, legumes, so more plant-based options, decreasing those ultra processed foods and added sugars, focusing on making sure we're getting a variety of micronutrients, magnesium, folic acid, B vitamins. We haven't really talked about magnesium, but that's also an important micronutrient. And then high adherence to dietary recommendations, such as like an anti-inflammatory diet. So more Mediterranean style types diets that promote fish consumption and exclude those ultra processed foods. So those all were associated with a reduced risk of mental illness and mood disorders. One thing I haven't touched on yet is hydration. That's also really important for mood. So providing your body with adequate and sufficient fluids to function appropriately. So again, 60 to 70% of your total body weight is water. So we want to make sure we're replenishing that. And being dehydrated, chronically dehydrated which a lot of people are, can impact your mood negatively, and your energy levels. So making sure you're staying hydrated is really important. So typically you want to estimate that you want to have about half of your body weight in fluid ounces of water a day, or fluid. And you can usually meet about 20% of that through eating hydrating foods like fruits, vegetables, and dairy products. And then here's just a summary on what to boost based off of current research. So sources of omega-3s, or an omega-3 supplement if you are not a fan of fish or any of these options. Our fruits and vegetables, especially our berries, those are really great for us because they have antioxidants as well. So eating more plant-based in general. Our fermented foods and our probiotic and prebiotic foods that we talked about. Eating a varied diet, and if you're not taking a multivitamin to combat that, and vitamin D supplement potentially if you're deficient, and making sure you're getting adequate fluid intake. Feel free to screenshot this or write some of these down, because these are typically what I recommend to help improve your mood besides just eating a regular diet. All right. It's also really important to get your regular physicals with your primary care physician and routine blood work to address any nutritional deficiencies that you may have. Also, you can see a registered dietitian if you want to adapt any food behavior changes. All right, so that was a long presentation. I went a little bit over, my apologies. I see there's a couple questions.
I can help you with them.
Thank you.
Okay. So we'll start at the top. What about sugars? I told you only do 45 grams per meal of carbs, because I have sugars. Do you have the number of carbs you should have so so you won't get sick?
Yeah, so carbohydrates are very important for us. If you're being told you need a certain amount of carbohydrates per meal, that could be true depending on who told you that. I would definitely recommend seeing a dietitian. We can find what you specifically need when it comes to carbohydrates. If there is a blood sugar issue, and we can help you choose healthier sources of carbohydrates as well to help control blood sugar.
Okay, next question is, what is a macronutrient versus a micronutrient? Can you give some examples?
Yes, so our macronutrients are our carbs, our protein, and our fat. So those are essential nutrients, but our micronutrients are also essential. So macronutrients would be things like a piece of bread, which would be a carbohydrate, a piece of chicken, which would be a protein, avocado, which would be a healthy fat. Whereas micronutrients are a lot of the nutrients found in those foods, like our vitamins and our minerals. So like vitamin C is prominent in a lot of our fruits. That's an essential micronutrient and can actually help heal our wounds and help prevent illness. So that's just one example of a micronutrient.
Okay, next question. How much water do you recommend to drink a day?
So this depends on the person. So regular healthy adults, I recommend typically about half of your body weight in fluid ounces a day. If you do have some health conditions, that can change. So you may need a fluid restriction if you have congestive heart failure, chronic kidney disease, fluid accumulation like edema on the body. So it really depends on what your health status is and how much fluid you should be consuming. So you definitely want to, if you do have a health condition, consult your physician and also a dietitian.
Okay, next question. Also, can you give us some positive foods to focus on?
Yes, so I mentioned that already. So definitely making sure that you're getting some good sources of omega-3s. So those fatty fishes, walnuts, flax seeds, canola oil, those are good sources of omega-3s as well. Fruits and vegetables, so focusing more on plant foods as well, increasing those is really important. Whole grain foods, so whole grain bread, 100% whole grain or whole wheat breads. Quinoa is a great option, so a lot of different whole grains. And making sure that you're getting regular blood work so you're not deficient in anything specifically. But yeah, just promoting those fatty fishes and more of a plant-based style diet with fiber.
Okay, and then the next question, someone is looking for a list of the foods because it was too quick to, I guess, jot everything down.
Mm-hmm.
I will be forwarding the PowerPoint presentation. So if you can add a list at some point and I can, forward it to the people that would like to have the list.
Yes, definitely. And if you want more information, because I did have a lot of information that wasn't actually put on the slides. So if you were looking for specific recommendations or something that I said, you can definitely email me. I'll have my emails right on the screen. Actually, I'm going to move my chat box so you can see it, but it's kristen.birdsey@wakefern.com. You can also call me at either of the stores and we can talk more in detail about what we talked about during this presentation.
Okay, let's see. Let's see, can we, oh, yep, another question for the webinar, which as soon as it goes through the process through Atlantic Health Systems, it'll be available on our website. And same question. Okay, it says, can you please share how much of the vitamins you need daily? I missed it.
Yes. So this varies depending on what stage of life you're in. So I can definitely provide that for you based off of your specific needs, but it varies depending on the vitamins. There's so many to go through. I'd rather answer that off camera and more specifically for you since you're asking.
Right. So for whoever is looking for that information, if you can just put your email in the chat and send it directly to Kristen, and then she can get in contact with you that way.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And then should we take probiotic vitamins?
So probiotics are a great option if you are experiencing a lot of GI upset, gastrointestinal issues. I wouldn't recommend them necessarily for everyone. It really depends. So if you aren't having any GI issues and you're having regular bowel movements and you have a good mood, you're not really depressed or feeling down, you might not need a probiotic. And if you're eating a healthy, varied diet, but if you're not eating a healthy, varied diet, you're feeling down, you're having some GI upset, then a probiotic may help you. You can always reach out to me again and we can talk about what you're currently doing and what your food looks like right now. And then I can recommend whether I'd recommend what I would think for you if I recommend a probiotic or not. So it's more specifically based off of what you're currently doing.
Okay, I believe that is it for the questions.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, let me see. Okay, so this concludes our webinar. Thank you for joining us, and a special thank you to Kristen for dedicating your time and expertise today. If you have additional questions or comments, please send us an email to communityhealth@atlantichealth.org, or you can call 1-844-472-8499. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.